Hey everyone, I'm rather incoherent, and today we're going to be speculating about the strength of the new survivor fighter Hank Samson from Hemlock Vale. I assume that you roughly know who Hank Samson is, but if you don't, the quick and dirty rundown is he is a 5-fist, 3 mythostat survivor fighter. He's able to be Tetsuo Mori for your team, and he might have terrible soak, but it's because when he dies, he actually full heals and switches to a new investigator. It's not this one on the right, this one's bad. You switch to the one with 6 fists. And that means you have like more soak than a normal character, assuming you manage to split it roughly evenly before you die. You have the best fist in the game, you have insane mythos stats. With the new Sparrow mask, you're testing at 6-5 with 1 asset. You have access to stuff like Pete and Jessica to be invincible. He's insanely durable and insanely reliable. But the reality is he doesn't have much of an ability aside from just like tanking for your team a little bit, aside from gaining some resources later, and resources later is never that big of a deal. His main ability is that his stat line is insane. So the real question with how good Hank Samson gets to be is what is his deck building? If he's not getting some recursive valuable thing out of his card, what does his deck building do? Deck size 35 just seems like a kind of left field nerf to him, like, oh no, he seems pretty strong, let's make him a little bit less consistent. I don't think this matters a ton at all. It just like slightly irks me as a player. It's not the sort of thing I like to see. Balancing by making more random is not good design. I will die on that hill. I don't feel like elaborating on it either. But the real thing we're here to discuss is his card pool. Because he has access to survivor cards 0 to 5, obviously, neutral 0 to 5, obviously. And then the big thing, up to 10 splash and 8 and/or spirit level 0 to 2. And I'm of the belief that if these 10 splash cards are not able to make him a meaningfully better fighter, he cannot really be a top tier character. He'll never be a better fighter than Yorick, for instance. And the reason for this comes down to action compression. In my tier list video, I talk about this a lot fairly early on. I think I'm talking about Calvin when I make this point, but I'll say it again here. A character needs to do 3 things to be a great character. The first thing they have to do is survive. If you die, you don't do anything, you're useless. Being durable and surviving is nice, but all you need to do is just barely survive every scenario. Whether you're ending with 1 horror soak, 1 health every scenario, or 10, doesn't really matter as long as it wasn't 0. Now, obviously, since the game is random, you don't want to be ending with 1 every scenario. No one's going to consistently do that. If you're ending on average at 1 health, then a substantial portion of the time you're probably dying just barely, right? But the point is that you just need to be able to survive. You don't need to be insanely durable. The difference in Will Yorick and Lily Chen is not nearly as big as Will Yorick's literal invincibility would lead you to believe. So, condition 1 for being a good character, survive. With 5/5 plus 6/4 in his soak and red cards, that's done. Hank Samson will survive. Condition 2, you have to be reliable. You have to just like take the test and then do the thing. You have to pass. Now, with 5 in fist and 6 in fist later on, Hank Samson is reliable. That is just done. There is no question. It's not like, oh, can you make it work? You will be passing the test. So Hank Samson is guaranteed to be a good investigator, probably a strong investigator at a bare minimum. Whether or not he's one of those top tier, like overpowered, crazy investigators depends on criteria number 3, the thing that really elevates the best characters in the game. And it's the reason a lot of characters that would otherwise be somewhat weak are able to do much more than their stats and survivability imply they might, and it's action compression. When you look at survivor cards, you tend to be looking at relatively subpar weapons. Stuff like this hatchet, for instance, where, yeah, you hit for 2 damage really reliably, but then there's a bunch of text that makes it unreliable. Typically, the best weapons for survivors are Meat Cleaver with Pete Sylvester to make it work every turn. You can argue that Chainsaw is better because it deals more damage, but it has more setup cards. It's not entirely clear to me. I don't fully believe that Chainsaw builds are just better than Meat Cleaver, even though they do build more damage, and that more damage is a form of action compression. If you attack with a Chainsaw twice, that's the same as attacking with a Hatchet 3 times. So as a fighter like Hank, action compression means find ways to deal with enemies that happen faster than 2 damage in action. 2 damage in action is your baseline. For a Cleaver, it would be finding a way to get more than 1 clue in an action, or finding a way to skip actions so that you can investigate more, like Shortcut and Seeker, for instance. So any sort of movement tech helps. Safeguard is one of the best action compression cards in the game, for instance. But the main thing we're looking for with this splash is ways to deal damage and manage enemies that is notably better than Meat Cleaver. Because if you just build Chainsaw Hank Samson, I don't think he's going to be an insane character. He'll be very good. I don't think for a second that we're discussing whether or not Hank Samson's a bad character today. We're talking about his card pool and the game theory behind action compression, and whether or not he will be good enough at fighting quickly and dealing with multiple enemies simultaneously that he actually gets to break into the top tier of characters. I will also note that he can do support stuff like run Earthly Serenity with Forehead and Survivor. There are other ways to get into top tier, and I will mention that one of them is a new card. Let me go find it. We have the Token of Faith. This is a card that allows you to be cross-map autofail negation for your whole team. So Hank Samson can play a weird jank support character by playing like just a perfectly functional fighter and immediately buying Token of Faith. Is that good? Is that great? I don't know. It's something that's not in the game right now. We've never had support in the form of Token of Faith. Like, this is Father Mateo's whole ass character card, and it's just a 3 experience accessory. It's kind of nuts. So when I talk about action compression today, it's the main way that Hank is going to become a top tier fighter, but it's possible that there are other ways for him to compete with top tier fighters without directly getting better at fighting. For now though, let's assess the new cards that came with Hank and the cards in this card pool that are going to make him better at fighting. And one of those cards is Hatchet. Hatchet is insanely reliable to damage. Coming back over to Hank, even in his base form that's swinging at 8, when you upgrade him swinging at 9 before any other assets are in play. Now if you defeat the enemy, Hatchet discards, but let's say you're dealing with a 3 health enemy. Hatchet is going to deal 2 damage attached to them, then you're just gonna punch them in the face at like base 5 to 2 or something, and you're going to finish them off. There are conceivably builds where Hatchet's in one hand and something else in the other, and Hatchet is making you more reliable. I personally don't think this is a good thing, because now you have to draw multiple weapons, and you could probably have just hit them with the other hand repeatedly. Like if your other hand's a meat cleaver, do I really need a Hatchet separately that I spent experience on to take less horror in a given turn? Maybe, but I don't think Hatchet is a particularly impressive card. I can see it having a home, I can see it making the deck better, but it's not making you fight faster. It's not compressing actions, it's just a neat thing that might improve the deck, but it's not improving the thing that holds him out of being that top tier character. Next up for Hank, we have the Pitchfork that's printed alongside him. It's a +1 fist, +2 damage weapon, which is insane for 0 experience even at 2 hand slots. But if you succeed at the attack, you lose control of it and attach it to your location, and you'll need to spend another action to pick it up again. At a rate of 2 actions for 3 damage, this isn't actually that good. I will note that if you're holding a pitchfork in your hands and you have non-hand based ways of fighting, then what you can do is, it's functionally fine if you like sweeping kick Reastrad pitchfork, and next turn you have to pick up the pitchfork, but this turn you dealt 8 damage and evaded a guy. You can build around Pitchfork in a way where it's better on one turn and worse on the next turn, just like Ornate Bow often is. In many ways, this is a direct parallel to Ornate Bow. It's not nearly as accurate, but it's the exact same 3 damage, reload the bow sort of deal, except if you miss, you don't need to reload it, so it is better than Ornate Bow in that way. I definitely think Pitchfork is a very, very viable card, and I'm interested in trying it. And it will probably be in every level 0 Hank deck I make, but I don't think it's like a crazy card. I think it's just fine. I don't think this is single-handedly elevating him in any way because this second part here is so brutal, and he has no way to generate actions, no safeguard, no Leo DeLuca, no haste. He's not finding the time to make this bearable. Having looked through the entirety of the visual spoiler on ancientevils.com right now, the only other card that's come out that seems immediately relevant to my interest for Hank Samson is the innate skill Strong Armed, which is, yeah, ridiculous. Let's not pretend for a second it's anything else. Strong Armed is Vicious Blow that also lets you cancel the autofail. This is a really, really good card. It is worth noting that it is not going to work with fighting events though. And coming over to Hank Samson again, innate and spirit cards are respectively skills and events, so if these spirits are helping us fight better, then we're not going to be committing that card on them. We're only going to commit that on whatever we're fighting with. Whether that's a sledgehammer or a pitchfork or a meat cleaver, whatever it is, that skill doesn't work on these spirits, and that is a slight bit of anti-synergy to be aware of. But that said, Strong Armed is just an incredible card. It's Vicious Blow that cancels an autofail. You best believe I'm signing up for that. So with all of the new cards out of the way, let's start digging through the piles of old cards for levels 0 to 2 and 8 in Spirit, starting with the innate skills. And typically speaking, the innate skills do not offer action compression. We have specifically Brute Force. This is absolutely relevant, and it doesn't use up our splash because Brute Force is going to be giving us 3 damage for 1 action. It's something we can do while holding a pitchfork if we're worried about dropping the pitchfork. It's definitely a good card. I think more accurately, it's something we can do after dropping the pitchfork without picking up the pitchfork again. Brute Force obviously has a home in Hank, it's action compression that he will need, and it doesn't use up his splash. Daring seems really good in him, obviously, but it's not giving him action compression in any meaningful way. It's just doing the same thing, but more reliable. Eureka, again, seems very good because, like, he will be taking Mythos test at good numbers with Sparrow Mask, may as well pass more consistently and draw a card for it. Ghastly Possession is worth talking about at least a little bit, because if you do run Chainsaw, you can go ahead and use this to just get 1 more charge on a Chainsaw. It's not very good, it's mostly just funny, but I do feel like I need to mention Ghastly Possession. And as I continue to scroll through these, I'm not convinced I'll be finding much more. Nimble is definitely some form of action compression. It is not a bad card, but I'm not convinced it's going to really help a fighter very much who typically fights by using Fist. Quick Thinking absolutely gets to be a part of this discussion though. Quick Thinking is just straight up action compression in its simplest form. It gives you another action to do thing with. It's very good, it will be seeing play. This is a uniquely terrible Savant since Hank's book is 1. Don't think I'll be running Savant and Hank. And it looks to me like there's really nothing else in Innate. It's just Brute Force and Quick Thinking, and you already had Brute Force. But Quick Thinking is a meaningful buff to action compression that will be hanking help out, huh? Let's try that again. That will be helping Hank out a lot. The real thing to be looking at is these events though, because there are a good chunk of spirit fighting events. Stuff like Get Over Here isn't super useful. It is engage and fight during an lightning bolt window against further away enemies later on. I can see Get Over Here making the cut, but it's not the card I want to run. Hank's not going to have a great economy to pay for this. He's not going to be dealing meaningful damage with this. It's really just lightning bolt engage. And on the base level, when getting the basic fight action on top of it's not even worth it. This is really just a Nat Show card. And even though it is action compression, I don't think it's efficient enough to see play outside of Show. You do get access to Blood Eclipse, which will be a 3 damage attack, and you don't mind taking the damage, and you'll have Jessica Hyde to soak the damage for you later on, but it's only a base of 5 with your normal 3 head. Later on it'll be a base of 6, with Pete Sylvester it'll be a base of 7. Blood Eclipse is a small consideration, but I'm inclined to believe that with Quick Thinking already taking up a slot, we can probably do better with our other 4 slots in our splash. And the same thing is true of stuff like Clean Them Out and Counterpunch. Technically they are helping an economy card, just free damage on Counterpunch. Counterpunch, unlike the stuff I was saying with Nacho only on Get Over Here, Counterpunch is probably playable. I'm gonna open this up in a new tab, but I don't think it's gonna be something that I'm putting in my top splash cards. I hope not, anyway. Gang Up is nuts. Gang Up is one of the best damage cards in the game if you can get the synergy package online. Unfortunately, the event and skill access we have gives us literally no other class cards, so we'd be reliant entirely on cross-class cards available to red to trigger this. I want Gang Up to be a cool thing you can do, but I'm really just not seeing Synergy Hank being a thing, especially when you don't have a way to recur this because it's a experienced blue card and it is the thing you're building for in a 35 card deck. Gang Up just does not feel like the play to me at all. Live and Learn's not taking up a splash slot, but it is worth mentioning that Live and Learn and Lucky are action compression because they convert failures into either another chance or a success, and that means effectively that while they're not able to turn a 6 damage turn into an 8 damage turn, they do get to turn a 4 damage turn into a 6 damage turn when the bag is bullying you. There we go, we're finally getting into the shit that's gonna help us out a lot. We have access to Reastrad. This win is massive. You put 3 curses in the bag, you swing at 8 for 4 damage. Reastrad seems like an auto-include to me. So far, it and Quick Thinking are the biggest benefits we have in Hank. Counterpunch is trying to help. A question I have is whether or not we gravitate towards a Bless build to make use of Radiant Smite, because, you know, it does just hit like a brick shithouse. The issue is the best characters for enabling Bless are Guardian Fighters, right? Like, you can't run the assets the Guardian Fighters are using to do it, and you don't have the abilities of them either. Parallel Zoe's ability, Sister Mary's ability, and the Ancestral Token from the new expansion. All of that's really good at putting Bless in the bag, and none of that's available to a Radiant Smite Hank Samson. I was mentioning though that Token of Faith is cross-map autofail negation. And it is not just that, it also is a Bless thing as well. It helps put Blesses in the bag. It's possible that with Favor of the Sun in Ancient Covenant being so strong in Survivor, Radiant Smite offering Action Compression, that there is a Bless build for Hank that actually justifies running this card and puts enough Blesses in the bag to get the job done. There we go, the last page is giving us the real good shit. We have access to Sweeping Kick. No, this doesn't deal extra damage, but the fact that it just basically guarantees an evade in Hank is insane. This is 2 damage plus evade, it's basically 2 actions, and while I'm not a big fan of evading, I am a massive fan of sweeping the leg against the boss enemy. This is an incredibly valuable tool because the one time evading goes from a bad solution to the best solution is when you're fighting a 24 health massive enemy that hits for 3/3, and that's where Sweeping Kick is at its best. I think Sweeping Kick easily gets a slot. It goes into that group of like Quick Thinking Reastrad, where those are easily top tier cards to run in this character. Stand Together is not giving you Action Compression, but I have to open a tab for that because it is one of the best economy cards in the game, and it's easily in contention for the slots. Toe to Toe is obviously very good, but it's more about just having guaranteed damage, not so much Action Compression. And honestly, one of the slots is locked and it's not for anything else to fight with, it's for Ward of Protection level 2. Because I mean, like if you have a fighter and you're trying to get into that top tier of characters, having access to this card does a lot of work. So we're currently looking at Quick Thinking, Reastrad, Sweeping Kick, and also Brute Force for things we can do to Action Compress. We have Ward of Protection to help our team. Stand Together might be that last slot. Maybe it's Radiant Smite and a Bless build. I don't think it's Counterpunch, I'm gonna close that one. I think that we have some really strong shit available. Like Ward of Protection is what really pushes it over. I think these 6 cards, running 2 of each of these already have me pretty hyped because that's just 4 experience, right? These are really cheap, get going immediately, really improve your fighting ability. And then Ward of Protection for the team utility, Stand Together fits that identity. Maybe it's a Bless build with Radiant Smite instead of Stand or instead of one of these other cards, I don't know. But honestly, having looked at all of that at Strong Armed as well, that could be your last slot over Stand or Radiant Smite. I feel pretty confident that Hank is going to be incredibly strong. Quick Thinking, Brute Force, Reastrad, Sweeping Kick is just enough. Because honestly, of those cards, like Sidus gets Brute Force and Quick Thinking, but I always feel like Sidus isn't super reliable at triggering Brute Force. I feel like Quick Thinking is insane in him, but it's the only thing that's really doing the Action Compression for Silas. Reastrad and Sweeping Kick up over Sidus is a huge deal. The higher base fist is a huge deal. Ward of Protection is a huge deal. I think Hank Samson's card pool does it. I think he has access to enough Action Compression that he's a meaningfully better fighter than every survivor except Daniela and Yorick. I think Daniela and Yorick have some pretty nuts Action Compression due to their Guardian cards and their abilities. But I think Hank has enough to be an absolutely top tier fighter. Just barely. He doesn't have a lot of it. Maybe he'll get more support. We haven't seen all the cards yet. But he has enough to do it. And he has some very interesting team support stuff going on because of Earthly Serenity, Ward of Protection, Stand Together, the new Token of Faith combined with a potential Bless build and Radiant Smite. I think there are at least 2 builds of Hank that I would be theory crafting and playing relatively early in Hemlock Vale. And I think he's an easy A+ based on what I've looked at today. Before, I was like kind of hyped for it. I hadn't put a ton of thought into the shape of the actual deck. But like, let's just throw together a quick deck that is like not a proper Hank deck, but it's a simulation of what Hank might look like. So this is like the quick shitty first draft of what he could look like. And with Lucky 3, Ward 2, Take Heart, and Bandages, and Earthly Serenity, there's a lot of team support. With his High Fist, Meat Cleavers, these are a holdover for like what Hatchet could be. Maybe Hatchet's not even better than Derringer, I don't know. Like, I haven't put a ton of thought into it, but it has a lot of team utility. He has insane stats. He has enough Action Compression from these events, just barely, but I think Quick Thinking, Brute Force, Reastrad, and Sweeping Kick mean that any sort of bosses or enemy pile-up will be dealt with relatively easily. I can't imagine this character is anything less than incredibly strong. I don't think it gets into my S tier. Maybe it does because it has a more team utility than a Will Yorick, and it's more reliable off the bat than a Yorick, even though Yorick sets up to be better. Because Yorick, undoubtedly, Yorick with Bandages, Beat Cops, and Guard Dogs, has better Action Compression and is a stronger fighter than this character, than Hank Samson will ever be. However, I think he also has less team utility than Hank Samson can, and I'm not clear, like, where does he fall relative to Theory? Is he a little bit better? Is he meaningfully better? Is he a lot worse? I think he's definitely hitting my A+. I think having looked at what's available to this deck, having seen what those 10 splash really amount to, Hank Samson's gonna be nuts. But I needed to sit down and really look at it because I don't respect Silas very much as a main fighter, and the lack of access to Sweeping Kick and Reastrad, the lack of team synergy with stuff like Word of Protection and Stand Together, these 4 cards right here are really important to me liking Hank. It's not just quick thinking. That didn't do it for Silas, and it wouldn't do it on its own here, but I think Hank has enough. I am optimistic. I'm looking forward to it. I've talked a lot of shit about Silas today as an example of the survivor problem, but it's worth noting that, yeah, you have to fit the cards in. However, Silas got 2 different versions of Vicious Blow this expansion. He got Long Shot, and he also got Strong Armed, which he can use to cancel tokens and then pull back once he gets a token that passes on any test, which is kind of crazy. Well, not any test, it has to be a fight test with his asset, but still, that's not nothing. I think Silas did get meaningful buffs from this current expansion, and I'm interested in seeing how much higher he can move up on the tier list. Anyway, let's wrap this up. Thank you for watching. Thank you to my Patreon supporters, Evan and Jeffrey B, and I'll see you in the next one.